They want to be a part of these discussions. They want to be a part of the change. And so what's going to be important is pulling these employees into conversations where they are able to give us the information that we need to build companies that they feel like they can thrive in. And it's hard. It's so hard because I want to be, I feel like I'm young, but I realized that my work ethic is like of the old school. It's of a different nature. And my kids are actually being raised by me, but in this world, they're going to grow up probably to be, more on that side. And I think the best thing that we can do, I have a team where most of my team members are like in their early to mid 20s. The average, like the average age is like 25, And so first of all, realizing I feel like we're all equals, but recognizing they're all 15 years younger than me at least. And then calling them into conversations, roundtable discussions, coffee chats, or whatever we can do, sending out surveys to collect data about what is going to help them to feel like they can thrive. And of course, sometimes we get some responses that I'm like, nah, absolutely not. We're not doing that. But most of the time, from the greater group, I do have over 160 employees. So I'm able to extract, the data helps me to take the biggest piece of the pie and go, okay, I think we can do this. All these other little things, maybe not, but I do think we can do this and we can find a way to meet in the middle because it's an evolution. I saw it as a behavior problem because I'm a behavior analyst. Yep. So I was like, this is a problem that impacts the employer, which impacts the families that we serve.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hart Hustle podcast. Today is going to be an incredible conversation because I have Portia James across the seat from me. Now, one of the things that we should recognize is that she is an amazing leader who is innovating in the ABA therapy space. Now, one of the things that we're going to dive into is not only her passion for this space, creating opportunities for people to get support who might not be represented in a lot of these spaces that we think about, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the passion that makes her such an amazing leader today. Portia, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So Portia, I got to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Work aside, who is the woman who sits across from me today? How would you describe her?
I am soft-hearted. I think that's the first thing. My mother. I've been married for 8 years to an amazing, the most supportive person I've ever met. I have 3 children. They are 15, 9, and 5, and they run me ragged. I'm their homeschool teacher for my younger 2, and I'm a sister. I think being a sister is probably one of my favorite roles that I carry. So outside of work, I think those are my big highlights.
One of the things I like talking about is all of the experiences that we've had in life are like simple brushstrokes that make up the masterpiece that is us, right? And so when we talk about not only the business that you founded today and Behavior Genius, but I want to talk about some of the experiences that you've been through that have brought you to where you are today. So why don't you kind of give everybody kind of like the rundown of exactly who sits across from me and how we got to this place?
Okay. Long story short, very short. I've been in the field of behavior analysis since 2006. I know I don't look it, but it's been that long for me, almost 2 decades. I started during my internship in college as a behavior technician and just kind of worked my way up the ladder. And then in 2019, I was working in a job where I was sitting in a corporate space as director of clinical operations. So it was my job to oversee clinical directors all over the United States for the company that I was working for. So there were about 16 of them, 16 states and 16 different directors. And my job took a turn from just being clinical as behavior analyst to understanding the KPIs and the ins and outs and the needs of the organization. I fell in love with organizational behavior management at that time. And really my job was to help to facilitate the growth and the continuing, quality of services provided to the families across the United States. So I did that for about 3 years. And then in 2019, right after I had my son, I went back to work from maternity leave. I complained about a $60,000 pay disparity between myself and a white man who was working in a lateral position to me. And I was locked out of my email by the time I got to my car. They didn't even formally fire me. So it was hard. That was really hard. I decided after spending a few weeks, it was during the holidays. So, I didn't spring into looking for a new job right away, although I didn't really have the money to take any time off. We just struggled for a little bit through the holidays. And after that, I decided I was going to get out of bed. Um, and I submitted an application for the largest healthcare in Southern California, IHP, and landed a contract with them and was like, all right, ABA is the only thing I really think I know front and back, in my sleep. And so I'm going to test this out and see if I can launch a social skills program for kids who are underrepresented here in San Bernardino County. And that's what we did in 2020 when we launched Behavior Genius.
I want to ask a couple questions.
Sure.
First of all, the experience of you being in such a powerful position of influence, 16 states, 16 directors underneath you, having a bad taste in your mouth after you left the organization, you decided to come back into the ABA space. Why did you think that creating your own company, as an example, was the way in which you were going to be able to do right by the people who we were trying to serve?
Ooh, good question. I think that a lot of people look at my story and they're like, wow, you're so brave, you're so strong for being able to do that. And the truth is, I was afraid. I was afraid to go back to work and to put my livelihood, the career that I had worked for almost 20 years, into the hands of someone else. I didn't know what to do. It was actually like one of those fork in the road moments where it was like, I had to choose to be courageous either way, either direction I went, whether I started my own company or went back to work. It took an enormous amount of courage for me to just walk back into the doors of a system that really wasn't designed to serve people who look like me. But I learned during that time that there's so much innovation and opportunity in adversity and inequality because so few people are running that race. And so, one thing about me that has always been true is that I thrive in the gap. Like, if there's a problem, an error, an issue, if we're performing at 80%, that 20% is where I really, really thrive. I do very well in that area. That's really where the change happens and where there's opportunities for innovation. And so I started this thing from a place of fear and lack and hopelessness and panic, like sheer terror, honestly. And
Yeah.
now, over time, I've been able to, through being in entrepreneurship, over the last 4.5 years, I've lost friends. I've had to make decisions that were really difficult for me to make, but I see more clearly now that my life's mission is to build a platform and to only be involved in other platforms where, people know that the people who are serving them are really for them. And whether that's me serving the people that I manage and then I get an opportunity to work with in my organization, or the families that we serve, it's not really just about autism anymore. That experience for me made it about the revolution, about reform, and about being connected to people who just want to do good work and they want to have pathways and opportunities to be able to do that without discouragement, or without a system that's going to tie them down or prohibit them from being able to actualize their true potential, and serve as many people as they possibly can.
I love that you identify that you thrive in the gap. I was having a conversation yesterday with a CEO from a large nonprofit in Connecticut, and he said, Keenan, I came into this organization and I had an opportunity in front of me. There were 2 years of horrible reviews and terrible reputation in our community, and I
Yeah.
looked at that as an opportunity in which I could apply myself fully to this mission to be able to create change in the community in which I served. And I said, why did you look at that as an opportunity? And he said, very frankly, when we come across challenges in life, we have 2 decisions to make. We can either cower because it's scary to move forward, or we can lean into these moments. And on the other side of those moments, we have the most growth. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. That's my hardest times, the most heartbreaking, or the most fearful times I've ever had, the most fearful I've ever been, have absolutely been in those times where it felt dark, where I felt alone, where really I didn't see a way out. And it's interesting because when I think about my past, and we always talk about this just in entrepreneurship, but I think it applies even in our work as employees. When I was working with kids, I had experiences where I would go into homes and families were already feeling hopeless about, the outcome that they could expect for their child. And I would come in and say, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And this is what I expect the outcome to be. And I have no doubts about that. I'm really good at my job. And I had a manager who would say, why do you build people up like that? Why do you give parents this hope when you don't really know, what you can do? And I was like, well, first of all, I'm a scientist. But second, I do know. I know that just like your friend said, this is where I thrive. When someone feels hopeless, including myself, or when it's looking bleak or dark, that's really where I get energized. We have no choice but to think innovatively or creatively when we don't see any other option. A lot of times, what I've learned is like when there's a bunch of options that we can pull from, we pull from the status quo, the lowest hanging fruit, the simplest way to resolve something. But when it looks like there isn't a resolution in sight, is really when you have to turn on that genius energy, blast the hip hop or whatever. Is this what just me?
Absolutely,
Maybe
yes.
blast the hip hop and just really go to work and be in the lab figuring out something, and it's hard. It's hard to build something that you've never built. It's even harder to build something that you've never seen. But that's really where the excitement is. That's where like the Elon Musk and the greats of our time, that's where they lived. They lived in that gap.
When we feel hopeless, one of the things that I've recognized in my personal reflection of my moments of despair is I don't know what to do to get out of this moment, and everything feels overwhelming. And the one thing that I relate with when you were talking about when you go into a family, into a home, and you speak to a family and they feel overwhelmed by the outcome of the situation, they do not have an illuminated path of saying, this is what we're going to do, and then this is what we're going to do, and then this is what we're going to do, so we can build momentum. And this is where I feel like a lot of people struggle, not just in entrepreneurship, but in life in general. If you don't know the work that qualifies and quantifies to the outcome that you're trying to accomplish, it's very easy to not know where to go. And the first step is let's establish a plan on how we can attack this. And if we execute on that, the results will come.
100%. I think, that happens in other healthcare fields, like oncology, for example. They bring the whole family into a room. They let you know that someone in your family has been diagnosed with cancer, and then they give you they call it a roadmap. I used to volunteer for a cancer organization. And so they call it a roadmap. And they literally break down this is, what your child, or it was children who I worked with, is going through. This is the prognosis. Here are all of your treatment options. And for each one, here's why we have selected, the best one. Here's all the information we have about each one, but here's why we've selected this one for your child. And it's collaborative. And the family gets to choose then how they're going to move forward, and how they're going to be guided by their professional, by their doctor. I don't think that we take it as seriously in ABA from what I've seen. I don't think that teams are walking into the home and saying, everyone gather around. This is my very serious assessment. This is what I've learned. This is what I'm confident about. And this is how we're going to tackle it. And if we go this route, I, with a high percentage, can be certain that you're going to yield these specific outcomes. I just think that the science in itself has become so watered down because of the rapid growth that people just aren't coming in as confidently to speak to families about what they can expect as any professional should.
Which is in direct contrast to an evidence based practice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really
Yeah.
interesting to me that we kind of lean on these things, and yet we are not willing to be able to put the game plan together and say, hey, if we follow this path based on all of the other individuals who we've engaged with and led
Yeah.
down this journey, here's our percentage of success here. These are the things that we're going to experience. And we need to lean back into that conviction. That's what I
Yeah.
feel like we need a little bit more. And I hear that in your voice, the conviction of saying, I'm really good at my job. And if you trust in me, we will make something happen here.
Yeah.
A little bit earlier, you had mentioned skills. Let's talk about why that word is so important in some of the areas of disparity and everything else that we're kind of talking about here.
Oh my gosh. Skills are so important. I think, people come in to work, what I've noticed, and I'm an elder millennial. That's what I like to call myself. I'm 39 years old, so I think I'm right at the cutoff. I have a sister who's almost 10 years younger than me, and she's like a true millennial. She's right in it. She always reminds me of what millennials want and what they need and how they respond to certain things. Um, and I'm just floored sometimes. I think um, a couple things are happening with skills. People are coming into a position and they're expected for all of the skills that they need to be trained by their company, right? So I'm coming in as a behavior analyst already, but I want you to teach me everything I need to know about how to be a behavior analyst, right? Which training is important. Training is absolutely necessary, but also when you get hired for a job, you have to come in with a skill set that we find valuable enough to pay you, right? And what's happening in behavior analysis specifically is that the incidence rate is just increasing so rapidly. When I first started, it was 1 in 166. And now we are at like 1 in 36. And so, because of that, people are just trying to meet the demand. So, behavior analysis has grown as an industry by 500% in the last like 10 years, which is insane. But what that means is that there just hasn't been enough training, enough opportunity for people, not only to be trained by the company, but to be trained by life experience, to have been in it and just have learned how to do the job and picked up skills along the way. That's how I was just thrown in with the sharks. And I just decided if I was going to swim or not. And millennials, that's not how they want to do their jobs. They want to be confident, right? They don't want to figure it out the way that we had to figure it out. They want to really believe that they have all the tools. They need a little bit more. It takes a lot more humanity to lead millennials, and to build them up and give them the skills that they need to be able to do the job so that they're confident in doing it. But a lot of times the skills go by the wayside because we're filling seats. It's like a butts in seats type of situation. And so, I think that's what we're seeing is that there's this contention between leaders and team members, and it really just comes from team members coming in very, very green, expecting to learn everything that they need to know from their managers, and managers just unfortunately not having the time to dedicate to ensuring that the skill set is there so that the team members can go in to the home confidently, you know.
I want to use the lens of ultimate accountability in this
Yeah.
instance. One of the things that is one of our core tenets here at my company is ultimate accountability. And what that means is you have to be ultimately accountable to yourself first, and that means developing the skill sets and everything else that comes along with that, right? And when you are ultimately accountable to yourself, not only can you take care of yourself better, but you can take care of your teammates better. Now, there is an onus and a responsibility for teams to continue to develop and nurture and cultivate the future leaders of an organization, but they can only take you so far. In a space where we have in Las Vegas, I mentioned our previous call, Southern Nevada, and you're coming to this community to serve as
I
well,
sure
a
am.
6,000 family wait list. 6,000 families are waiting for services here. That's a 2.5 year wait to access services. When we talk about the demand, we just do not have the time to be responsive, to be slow enough to respond to this. And so it's an interesting dichotomy of pressure with the lens of ultimate accountability that comes with it. And I feel like it's very important to lean into that element. What do you think about ultimate accountability?
Yeah, I'm first of all, I'm putting that in my pocket. I'm taking it with me. Trademark it if it's yours, because that's great. um, that's really where the disconnect lives in the area of accountability. I was attending a conference um, a few months back, and one of the questions posed for like a survey opportunity from the audience was, who is responsible for your well-being at work? And it was so interesting because there were so many different responses, right? The options, you had to just click a button. The options were like me, my manager,
Yep.
both, I think. And it was divided. And that division in and of itself of who should be accountable for what really leads to one of my least favorite circumstances or characteristics or attitudes, which is judgment. Um, feeling that someone else is accountable for your well-being or for your growth or for your understanding or your knowledge, solely accountable, and that there's no accountability on yourself to constantly be improving. Anytime you're in a scientific field, it is your responsibility to be educated on an ongoing basis. That's why we have continuing education and things like that, standards that we have to adhere to. But I think that the conversation needs to start at accountability, and teams and managers need to understand who is accountable for conducting a task, who's accountable for problem solving when something goes wrong, who's accountable for, your knowledge, your growth, your well-being, your happiness. And once there's an understanding there about everyone being accountable for themselves, then I think that's where we can say, okay, but this is where I can help. This is where I can be of support, right? Because there is growth that comes from collaboration, but the collaboration also, I think, really needs to come from people being willing to step up and say, this is how far I've come. And if we could collaborate on the other 20%, that would bring me from 80 to 100. And we just don't get enough of that.
So we talked a little bit about millennials here. I was listening to a podcast one time where the psychiatrist was talking about macro trends in generations, and we were talking about Gen Z. And he said that Gen Z has the least perceived efficacy on their lives to any generation at this point in time. And so everybody who doesn't understand what that means, they have the least amount of perceived willingness to impact their worlds to change the life that they're living in. So they think that somebody is going to come along and say, hey, Portia, this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to put you in this position to be successful, instead of thinking about how they can impact their world. And I'm not sure if this comes as part of the entrepreneurial mindset out of necessity, but I recognized a long time ago that nobody was going to come save me. And it was my responsibility to develop the skill set so I could provide enough value to create the life that I wanted, because the systems never supported me in my journey. I was never good at school. I was never a part of a great academic experience. And I realized that once I get on the other side of this, it's going to be me and myself only. And I saw that in my family culture as well. And I'm not sure if people are just naive to that idea. But what do you think about that necessity for nobody's coming to save us?
Yeah, I think that's really what puts the barrier, I've noticed, puts the barrier between me and my team, right? Where it's like, I cannot climb into your body and force your impact, right? You have to wake up every day and be hungry for it and want more. And if you do, I'm going to notice you. Other people are going to notice you, and you're going to be living in your own fulfilled vision for your life. But I think that so interesting that you say that, because I did go the academic route. I did everything right. I
Yep.
graduated. I went to college immediately. I graduated from there early with high honors. I really climbed the ladder in the best way that I could. And it didn't mean that I was going to be saved in the end, even by the fruit of my labor, right? It didn't
Yep.
mean that because I had this history, being a Black woman when I got out there was still a thing. And so I still had to carve my own path and create something that maybe didn't exist for me. And in the meantime, exist in places where I didn't necessarily feel that I belonged or that I was respected or honored. And so I've always, the only thing I know is how to get it. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to say it. That's the only way that I know. And I don't see another way to have success besides getting it every day, by yourself if you have to, figuring out on your own if you have to. And I do think that, millennials or Gen Z, they do kind of lead with this learned helplessness, I think. And
Ooh.
there's a spirit of us versus them, where it's like, I'm just going to be me and you're going to appreciate what I got to offer, right? Whether or not there's something that I have to bring to the table or not, and so it's almost like a challenge me to a duel type of situation between entrepreneurs, employers, and employees, and I think that where that comes from is people have just gotten tired of capitalism And I can understand that from like my lived experience, that people are just kind of in a place. This is the generation of the advocate. This is the generation where people are like, I'm standing for something, right? I'm falling for absolutely nothing. I'm standing on it 10 toes down, whatever it is that I believe in. And I think they have witnessed, some of them may have experience, but they're very young for the experience. But I think they've witnessed what we've been through, the elders, and
Yep.
they've decided they're not going that route, which is really commendable of them to say, like, something has to stop, right? Where we've paved the way through hard work and dedication and commitment, and they are just like, on a, on a skate, they want to skateboard right through the little
Yeah.
path, right? It doesn't work like that though, and I think that there is a middle that people need to reach. But I do understand where that mindset comes from, of just going, a lot of times we work and work and work, and then we just go, you know what, fuck it, lights out. i'm not
Yep.
i'm not doing any of this. Um and and so I think that's what we're experiencing, is that, like, resistance, that refusal to be a part of a system that doesn't respect people, that doesn't honor people, that doesn't give opportunities to people who deserve them. And I think that right now employers are experiencing the consequences of what was happening to us. Not that we're creating it, but just of what was happening to us. And now this generation is like, no more.
Oh man, there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. One of the biggest things that I recognize is I often bring this up in the podcast. So sorry for everybody who's been tuning in over the last couple of episodes, but I talk about in 2022, right? The Surgeon General came onto a national broadcast in America and said the biggest threat to our American society today is not another outbreak in a viral pandemic, but an epidemic of isolation and loneliness. Okay. Now, when you think about how distracted and how unmotivated people are in the world today because of all of the societal systems that have been created to gather your attention, take your money, and literally keep you engaged in doing things that don't matter to your end goal in life, it's very easy to feel hopeless. I truly feel that we are secretly yearning deep down inside of us to feel connected to a mission of impact in an organization that work can fulfill in our lives at this point in time. And I think that there's a true opportunity for leaders to inspire people to do exactly what we're talking about here, is take ownership for the things that you want to accomplish in life and do the work that is necessary, because fulfillment comes through the application of trying. You can't get the results that you look for in life by expecting for somebody else to come along and do these things for you. And
Yeah.
I worry about the macro trends of all these younger generations who aren't willing to put in the work to get the fulfillment on the other side, because everything is supposed to be easy.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, even just, I was talking to my husband just yesterday about a new training program. And I'm like, how do we make this like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, right? Because that's as long as people want to watch something. That's as long as they want to take to learn something. That's the what the algorithm has done, right? That's what Instagram has done, is it has taken big concepts and made them 1 minute, and honestly, people are able to process that quickly and understand in 1 minute, and have enough information at least to get an idea of where they need to explore and research. So I think that there's an evolution that we're experiencing, a human evolution of like how much our brains are willing to hold, how much stress we're willing to carry, because of technology. Like, we didn't have technology. My daughter actually lost an assignment, a paper assignment, the other day, and had a panic attack, just about. And she said, "Mom, you don't understand." And I said, "I understand, because when I was your age, we had Microsoft and it was new, and you could be working on your assignment, and then it would just disappear because there was no auto save."
My
So
dog
I
literally ate my
understand.
homework. You know?
Yeah, like, I understand, like, I trust me, I get it. And so, but I think, like, just even autosave, like, we had to remember every 10 minutes to like save our work.
Yep.
They don't even have to do that, and so I just think that, the impact of technology is shaping the workforce right now. And fortunately for me, I love technology. So I can kind of lean into it a little bit and go, how can we use technology to connect with our teams, maybe more frequently, but uh, shorter durations, right? I think that as leaders, we do have to. I wanted to stand my ground. Not gonna lie, like my first 2 and 3 years, I was like, these people are assholes. They're either gonna get it or they're gonna get it, right? Like it was hard being an employer. Um, but over time, I was like, I have to join them in this revolution that they're on in any ways that I can. Now, I can't fully go on every journey, but I can join them in the revolution. Being a revolutionary myself, I understand what they're fighting for and what they're fighting against, and I can try not to be the picture of that thing that they're fighting against. And I think that if we think more innovatively and think, how can I reach them? And look at the facts. They don't want to learn if it's longer than 10 minutes long. They don't want to come to the meeting if there's not a specific like agenda and an outcome. They don't want to hear somebody just talking at them, right? They want to be a part of these discussions. They want to be a part of the change. And so what's going to be important is pulling these employees into conversations where they are able to give us the information that we need to build companies that they feel like they can thrive in. And it's hard. It's so hard because I want to be, I realized I feel like I'm young, but I realized that my work ethic is like of the old school. It's of a different nature. And my kids are actually being raised by me, but in this world, they're going to grow up probably to be, more on that side. And I think the best thing that we can do, I have a team where most of my team members are like in their early to mid 20s. The average, like the average age is like 25, And so first of all, realizing I feel like we're all equals, but recognizing they're all 15 years younger than me at least. And then calling them into conversations, roundtable discussions, coffee chats, or whatever we can do, sending out surveys to collect data about what is going to help them to feel like they can thrive. And of course, sometimes we get some responses that I'm like, nah, absolutely not. We're not doing that. But most of the time, from the greater group. I do have over 160 employees, so I'm able to extract the data. Helps me to take the biggest piece of the pie and go, okay, I think we can do this. All these other little things, maybe not, but I do think we can do this, and we can find a way to meet in the middle because it's an evolution. I saw it as a behavior problem because I'm a behavior analyst. So
Yep.
I was like, this is a problem that impacts the employer, which impacts the families that we serve. And it was really hard for me to get out of that mindset and go, okay, this is an evolution that we're experiencing. Usually you're on one side of evolution, you don't get to be in the middle of it. But we had no cell phones, no computers, and now we have AI. So, like, we got to see the evolution. And I think just having open conversations about how can we meet you in the middle? I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to ever see eye to eye. Because what's happening is if we can't, then the younger crowd, they're starting their own companies, they're going into entrepreneurship, and they're not ready, but they're tired of the fight, and so they're going into entrepreneurship underqualified, underprepared. And I think that's gonna speak volumes to our economy, and I think we'll realize that in the next 10 years or so.
There's been a lot of influence out there. Before I kind of talk about that, I need to plug a pin in the idea that I'm riffing with in my head. The biggest skill set of our modern day leaders who are going to be successful in building the organizations for the future is the skill of curiosity. When we were born, I was born in 1990, right? And so I was in the middle of the millennial generation where I saw everything changing so quickly. And I had to be curious about what is this new technology? What is this new way to communicate? What are all AIM? What is Facebook? What is all these different type of things? Now we're here with AI. And unless we are willing to be curious enough to say, I need to adapt and change, like we've been talking about today, you are going to be stuck in a place where life and everything else is going to pass you by. And the people who you're begging to respect you are going to say, you have no idea what's going on. And so you almost have to be sharper than all of these younger people who are coming into the organization to prove to them that you're willing to be adaptable because they have a skill set of adaptability, which they've experienced in their lifetime, the pandemic, everything else that comes along with that.
Yeah, 100%. I think like, that is so true. That is a skill set. I was having this conversation recently where I was like, what is the issue with this particular employee, right? And the response from their manager was, you know, they just really struggle with change. and there's lots of change, and they just really get rattled and have a hard time navigating the change. It's stressful for them. And I said, got it. This is a brand new company. We're 4 years old. We're a baby. We're going to make updates just like Apple all the time, maybe monthly, right? We're just going to update all the time because we're getting better. We're learning new things and we're like being innovative. That is at the core of our company is innovation. We're a young company with young team members. And so what I need that person to understand is that if adaptability is not a skill set that they are using when they're going into change, when they're having to navigate change, that's where their growth spot is. Because anyone who's not adaptable will not be fit to lead this team. Because this isn't an old company that's been running the way that it's been running for the last 25 years and it's good and we don't have to make any change. We have to make change just to stay current, just to stay relevant for our families and our teams, and to be better, to be able to provide. We have to use technology to be able to provide better, higher quality services to the families that we support. And that does require us to learn a new software every now and then. And if that person is unable to adapt, they're not gonna do well in a company like this.
Building that culture is tough. Especially you have a unique advantage because your team is younger. I started my company as a telehealth company back in 2014. And so when I was bringing innovation to the table in healthcare, people were like, there's no way there's going to be a future for video in this space. And I was like, you guys don't understand where we're going. You're not being very adaptable. But I had team members who were in their mid 50s and they were playing as part of my chief executive team. And we were talking about things as simple as we need to record all of our team meetings so we can use those recordings to disseminate information to everybody else. They came from the healthcare sector and they said, we can't do those things. That's not how we do it. And I said, you don't understand where we're going. And if you're not going to be able to adapt this skill set, you're not going to be a part of this team. And years later, they're no longer here. And I've got a team now who leans into saying, how can we use these tools to be more efficient, to get more done? Because we have to do more with less, but you have to move fast and break stuff, like Mark Zuckerberg said back in the day, if you're going to have the biggest impact that you're looking for. It's the truth. You don't have the luxury of sitting around anymore.
100%. We don't have the luxury of having like consistency, and I think in ABA, I think I'm blessed in that there's ABA business owners that are learning ABA while they're owning the business. For me, I learned ABA, and I learned the industry while I was a behavior technician 18 years ago. And so I've seen how fast we have to move, and we weren't moving nearly as quickly as we are now. Um, we had paper data, binders, nobody was, I'm a freak in the spreadsheets now, but before we had to like paper, pencil, graph, it was grueling. And watching it evolve from something that was already faster paced than other, industries, but watching it evolve. And you're right, there really is a time where we have to decide, is this too much for me? Or am I willing to be curious? And am I willing to adapt and to grow? And it's not so much about following a trend. It's more so about being on the side of growth that you want to be on, right? Being on the side where you're not constantly taking 2 months to go, oh my God, this thing is happening. What are we going to do? Just immediately getting into the lab and innovating. And almost it requires us to be one step ahead, not of our competition, but just like you said, one day we're going to have telemedicine and this is going to be necessary. And I'm doing it now. That's what's hard about being an entrepreneur and a visionary, is that you saw that. And everybody else was like, I don't see the sky falling. It doesn't look like rain to me. And you're like, all right, well, do you want to be caught in it though? When it comes,
100%.
or do you want to be prepared? And that's hard because it slows us down to have to constantly be getting buy-in from the people that we serve and that we lead, in order to encourage them to do the work that we know is necessary because we can see from a different vantage point than they can.
There's a unique perspective that's happening right now, and I kind of want to get your 2 cents on this, is like the use of technology, specifically artificial intelligence, in spaces like this. Now, one thing that I've recognized in my years, my decade plus of spending time in this mental and behavioral health space, is the way in which we are trained. The mental and behavioral health professionals come from an academic experience, which is very much like you're going to go through the process, you're going to see how things go, but you're not taking an account for the compounding factor of exponential improvement in technology and how it makes a huge difference in all of our lives. I have been continuously, and this is like, it hits me right in the heart. You have to continuously convince the people in a space that has never been very adaptable and innovative to think around the corner, but they've never been rewarded and compensated to do so. And when I think about the rock and the hard place where we are right now with the increasing numbers of diagnosis every single year, the definition of insanity is thinking that we are going to do the same thing for the next 5 years and be able to outperform and get a
Yeah.
different result from what we've experienced. And that is terrifying to me. But we need innovative young leaders, very transparently, and entrepreneurs who are outsiders, who can bring a different perspective into these spaces and say, this is what you should be doing. And it's really tough, but you have to have so much grit and conviction, to go back to the point earlier, to get people to believe your idea. It's like you're almost a prolific leader when you just can see around the corner and be like, guys, it's fucking raining over here. You need to get ready. You know what I mean? And it's so frustrating sometimes.
It is frustrating. That's the hardest thing. I think is trying to get people to be on the journey and also to understand that this isn't capitalism. First of all, I didn't invent capitalism. So if it feels capitalistic, I'm a part of the system too as an employer, right? And I have to navigate as such. But in this industry, I think one thing that people don't understand is that the rapid growth is coming from the increasing rates of autism. This isn't like we're Target or X trying to hit a certain market to make billions of dollars for our own sake. I didn't know how to describe it at one point, and finally I was like, this is a service that I show up every day to provide because I want to, because this is what I want to serve people. And if in my work I can't serve people, I don't want to do it. But also, I don't want anyone, my team, my families, anyone, to forget that I am in service to mankind when I'm showing up to work. It's not about trying to make more money or trying to grow to get bigger. We're just trying to keep up with the need so that the need can be satisfied, right? But what happens is that there's like rapid organizational growth, which means that there are lots of opportunities for team members to advance, to get promotions, to learn new skills. And whether or not they have learned the skills, this rapid growth is leading to underqualified and undertrained managers who are then expected to perform with high levels of competence, right? High proficiency, competence, speed, and accuracy. They're expected to perform that way, but we don't have time to train them at the rate that we need them to grow, right? And so there's a saying that says, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the call. And I think that technology is going to make it possible for us to take high quality humans, like you said, outsiders, regardless of their experience, even in this field, provide them with high quality training, feedback, support, and reporting, and then turn those people into high quality managers and leaders versus like, this isn't the time for the natural leader. The natural leader should rise up and should help. But really, we're going to have to start building better leaders. And I believe that technology is going to do all the technical stuff so that people can get back to caring for the people. And that's the only way we're going to keep up with the demand.
I agree. I mean, technology has to be looked at. We do not have the luxury of looking at the classic human lizard brain perspective, looks at a threat and says, oh my gosh, that's going to take my job, right? You don't have the luxury of thinking about that anymore. Technology is here to accelerate you, to put you in the position of leverage so you can do what you do incredibly well. And everything else that you don't need to be focusing on, you need to think about how you can activate and implement a system that can take off the workload. Because let's think about the entire clinical experience. I mean, like the documentation fatigue, all of these things. There are so many companies that are blowing up now that are taking that off of our clinicians' plates. And if you think about the delays in the service process, if I spend a national average as a doctor, 5 minutes with my patient and then 15 minutes documenting, there's a huge bottleneck there. And we need to
Yeah.
attack that problem. And that's where I'm glad innovation is stepping up to do these things. I want to pivot a little bit because I know we're charged up on this to
Yeah.
talk about creating organizations that look like us to serve people like us? Why is this so important?
Oh my gosh. And when we say us, I think it's important to define us as the people, all the people. So, like for me, I live and work, I was born and raised in Southern California, San Bernardino County, where it is 60, at least 60% Spanish speaking. It's all black and brown. Um, and when I say us, look like us, I literally mean me as a representation of the community that I serve. Over the last year, corporations have told the truth when they started pulling the funding for their DEI programs, right? That they do not care. And I get a lot of questions about like, how can we build more diverse companies, um, hire more Black people? The only
Yeah.
advice that I have for people, it's not mystical. There's no magic wand. You just hire diverse people. One thing I'm really proud about at Behavior Genius is and this is incidental. I didn't do this intentionally until I saw the data. But 2 years ago, we gathered some data from demographic data from our team, and we realized that when put on like a pie graph, the racial demographic of our team members and the language demographic of our team members matched our families almost perfectly, like almost exactly, which I thought was so cool because, I get a lot of, well, how do you do that? I'm like, well, we don't discriminate in our hiring practices. We're hiring the people that live in these communities. We didn't do it on purpose, but now we do. Now we make sure that the people that we're hiring are a representation of the people that we serve. And the reason that's important is because we have an opportunity to go into homes where people look like us and to make impact, not just with a family, but in the entire community. And so we want to make sure that we're able to pair families for trust reasons, especially people of color, and different people of color, different cultures of people of color have trust issues around different things. But those walls come right down, and we're all able to do the work more effectively when we don't have trust issues and when we don't have cultural clashes or misunderstandings. So I think like the best thing we can be doing is putting people with a lived experience into homes with people with similar lived experiences, because then you don't have to be so innovative about how to solve this problem. You can just think about what you would want for yourself or what you would
Thank
want
you.
for your sibling, right? Like that's why it's important. You can think about yourself, which is the easiest thing to do, and go, what would I do for me, or what would I want done for me? And I can bring this to the table for this other person. And I think that we have like mystified DEI programs. I put air quotes because I don't subscribe to DEI programs, but we have mystified this thing and made it more difficult. And really, all it is us doing the thing every single day, knowing that our decisions impact everyone. And so, knowing that they impact everyone, do those decisions serve everyone who is impacted? And that requires the effort of the entire team right from the moment of hire.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think about one of the biggest um, things I will be proud of is the lineage of men who I came from. So my great grandfather was a sharecropper in Arkansas, right? A black man. My grandfather was born in 1930 and was discriminated against for the color of his skin and sacrificed so much to put his family in a position where they could just live a life, right? My father was the first entrepreneur in our lineage who made choices and sacrifices and took accountability to risk it to put me in a position where I can be successful. Do you know how good it feels to walk into a boardroom full of executives from a healthcare system who are all very transparently from one ethnicity, often white, and me and my team are sitting there and we are a representation of Spanish and women and black men who sit across from them and talk about how they should be innovating in this space to be able to create opportunities to serve more people. That is so important to me because often when we're thinking about the impact of being an entrepreneur and the mission of what you're building and what I'm building, it's not just to solve the next 5 years, but I secretly think that there's a real tactical need to inspire younger generations who look like us and come from similar lived experiences like us, who can understand that they can do this stuff too. And that's a huge responsibility that weighs on us, but it's one that's just for fighting for.
Yeah, 100%. I think all the time about the world that my kids are going to live in, the world that they're going to work in. And my kids don't have autism. They're not in the population that I'm serving, but they do have an opportunity to impact the world in a way that ties back to where they came from and who they are. And, it's so funny. I had this conversation with my mom where she goes, I was looking for a housekeeper. And my mom goes, well, just make sure you don't have them clean your kids' rooms. They need to learn how to clean their rooms. Your kids are going to grow up and they're not going to know how to clean. And at first I was like, I almost bought into that, that Black woman bullshit.
Yeah.
But, but then I was like, you know what, Mom? My kids are going to learn how to care for people. My kids are going to learn how to work hard. They're going to be doing things that are so much more important. And they're not going to have a dirty house because they're used to their house being clean, but they're going to have to learn how to make them do the work to make the money to afford to keep their rooms clean if they don't want to do it themselves, right? But it's just, I think in what we're doing every day, I have to remind myself often that the first people that I lead are the ones inside of my home. And if they're the only people that are ever impacted by my leadership, there are 3 of them and 1 of me. And so everything that I do is is a model for how I want them to show up for other people and how I want them to engage in work that fulfills them, but also serves their community. And just like you said, when you walk in, I love that you said that, because often when I walk into a room, I don't feel pride first. I feel inadequacy. I feel like maybe I don't belong here. These people are probably judging me because that's been my experience. But you're absolutely right. As I advance in my leadership, when I walk into a room, I'm like, look at these faces in here. Look at these people that get to sit around a boardroom table that come from all of these diverse backgrounds and have so much to bring to the table. These people don't even know. We're about to rock these white people's world. I have no idea.
Yep. Yep.
And I love that you said that, because I don't think we talk about the feeling of pride when you walk into a room and there is diversity, and knowing what power comes from that.
But it comes back to exactly what we talked about earlier, which is, you said when you walk into a family's home, you say, I am really fucking good at my job. And there's a conviction that comes after you know what you say is going to bring results. And if you're not on this boat, you're missing out. And that's where that feeling of inadequacy came from. Because very transparently, man, it's like when I first started working with my dad back in 2014, he's the only Black man other than me in these rooms. And I see how people look at him. And it came from a place of like, okay, we're trying stuff out. But my experiences and time that I've built up have not come from confidence of saying affirmations in the mirror, but having a stack of undeniable proof behind me that says I am who I say I am. And I can show you what's up because I know what I've done here. And that takes time, but it's also that element of accountability to myself as well, to continue to show up and do the work that I do because I know I'm right. And if you're not wrong, you're going to be caught out in this storm because it's coming.
Yeah, 100%. One thing I've learned, I wrote a book on organizational behavior management, which is like the study of human behavior in the workplace.
Plug it.
Right? It's called Radical OBM. It's available on Amazon.
There you go.
Copy sold. What I've learned even since, like before, I wrote this with all of my thoughts and my, what I had gathered then. But since then, just talking about the book, I've learned that the best way to sum it up is that organizational behavior management is human driven, but it's data empowered. Leadership is a social measure of competence. That's what makes it so difficult and so frustrating for people, because our hearts are in it, because this is a social measure of our competences. How can we impact the people that we lead? Data validates the decisions that we make and the skills that we have, and it fills in the gaps where people may not understand what they can't see. It tells a story about the organization, and when you're in leadership, that same data tells a story about yourself and your own track record. And that's why I was able to walk into those homes and go, I got you. You're in the best hands you can be in, not only because of my skill set, but because I wake up every day excited to be here and to do something that's hard for you. And I think that that is where leaders need to get back to, because when you're there, you're untouchable what you can do. You know, people used to tell me, can you go and speak to this family? Because bring your magic wand, because they need a little bit of magic. It's not magic. I'm just really passionate. And also, I have the numbers to back it. I've been in the game for a little
Yep.
bit of time. I've used my skills. I've done it wrong. I've improved. And I have a track record of not just serving people, but of improving the quality of life for the people that I've served with intention. And there's data that backs that. And that's really where the confidence comes from, knowing that you're competent because you have information that tells you so.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things is data doesn't lie and it cannot be discriminated against. Because if you're not looking at the hard black and white facts of what it is, then you're making poor decisions. And I can't change that type of ignorance, is what I'd say. You know, there's an amazing saying that I like to bring into these conversations. So there's an Olympic weightlifting coach, right? And he coined a phrase: the more ways you measure, the more ways you can win. So one thing he did with all of his athletes is he would have them measure every single lift that they did. So every single time that they got into a training session, they would hit a PR, a personal record. And what that did is that's created opportunities to build momentum and created morale around the journey that they were on. But it goes back to this data set and this data conversation. And your scientific background leans into this perfectly, because you have to have the data to stand
Yeah.
behind what you're saying. You can't make promises in today's world, but you have to show proof of why people should stand behind you. And I feel like that in itself just needs to be emphasized a little bit more.
Yeah, a lot more. I think, people no longer, and it goes on the other side too, right? People do come into organizations and they have no track record, or they have no experience, or they have no proof, but they have all the confidence in the world. I love the idea of personal best, personal record. That's always like been I come across as very competitive. I do like to, you know, play games. I like video games. I will beat you in game night every time. But not so much for the competition between me and another person, more so, am I maximizing my potential? Am I better this time than last time? Did I get this person to grow at a faster rate, or to learn at a faster rate than I got the last person to grow at? Every time there's turnover within my organization, especially at higher levels, I look at what can we build so that we have the infrastructure to build a better employee the next time, right? To continuously get better and better, for the sake of the people who are here, not so much for the sake of beating the competition, because there is no competition when there's
Yep.
hundreds of thousands, when there's 6,000 kids in Nevada who need support, right? Who are on a waiting list, but just so that we know that we're in alignment with our vision and our mission, and that we're getting closer and closer and closer to that as we continue to move forward. Having those types of I measure everything. And I know it drives my team crazy, but they can't argue with me, because, like what you said about data, doesn't lie. So I can
Yep.
walk into a room and really tell them anything that I want to tell them, but I back it by data just so that they understand where it's coming from. When I open up the floor, they're like, there's really nothing that we can say that disagrees with what you have, in terms of data, on why this decision is being made, or why we're going in this direction, or why we're using this technology or going away from this technology. It's just so important, because we don't have time to get into the weeds. We're growing and we're moving, right? You got to move and break, move fast and break things. We don't have time to be in the weeds of trying to get people on board. We just need people to be able to respond to the facts so that we can continue, moving at a pace that serves, people who really need the help.
I want to talk about an interesting dichotomy. And this is something that I've struggled with for a long time, but I feel like I'm getting better at it now. Being incredibly impatient in the micro and being very patient in the macro. Because the only objective that we have, you and I, as leaders of organizations, is to not stop playing the game. And when we talk about the impact that we're trying to have in our communities and the people that we serve, the only objective is to keep this ball rolling. I want to listen to your perspective on the importance of really strict action and taking action right now in the micro, but having flexibility and recognizing that this is a long marathon that we are on together. What's your perspective
Yeah.
on that?
I like to build in flexibility. I'm not an inflexible person. I couldn't be to do my job, but I do not like to have an expectation for the future that I can't realize with my everyday. So, what I do so that I'm not spending too much time feeling down and out when my little shit didn't work is I plan every single day. And I also have a big plan for in 3 months, 6 months, a year, 3 years. I know that the vision will get more and more clear as I get closer to meeting it. So I forgive myself every day for, I try not to put myself in a position where there's like, this is the path.
Mhm.
I have very strict policies around being flexible enough to pivot, and my team is expected to do the same. So I like to have a plan A, a B, and a C, and knowing that all of them could lead to that vision, but also knowing any of them could also go away at any time. And it helps us to clarify which exact path we want to take. I am extremely impatient um in the micro. That's yeah, I'm very like I'm not with my team always. When I'm in a conversation with them, one thing that I recognize that they've helped me to recognize is I'm way over here thinking about and planning for and preparing for that. And I used to feel bad about that because they're in the day to day, they're in the minutia, they're in all of the things that I feel like would slow me down if I were in them. And so there was like this conflict of like, well, you don't see us, you don't hear us. I do. I see you, I hear you, and I'm over there. My job is to close the gap between where I'm at and where you're at. And I think it's just something that I'm learning every day is to not to get into the day to day in an effort to seem more present, but to recognize and document when I can how the day to day leads up to this big thing. It's like you're building a brick wall and you just got one brick. And it's like, I'm the only person that knows what this is going to look like when it's built.
Yep.
Everybody else is just putting bricks on the wall, right? Um, the more people, the more I can use visual representations of what that structure is going to look like, the better. But honestly, sometimes I don't know. That's where like my humanity shows. And I used to feel really, inadequate about that. Like I don't know exactly, but I know that something's up there, right? I know we have to go this direction, and I don't even know for how long, but I know in the right now what we need to do to get there. Um, and I don't feel inadequate anymore because I'm like, that's I run around here like an AI. So if there's any flaw or anything about me that's imperfect, it's that I just can't tell that I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know exactly, but I know that God is guiding us in this direction or that direction, and I can see it. It may be a little blurry for me, um, but I always know what's best in the moment, and I trust myself to make decisions based on what is to come, even when it doesn't make any sense to other people.
And when you have enough of those experiences, you start to be validated by the reality of the moment. When you're a visionary and you are guiding the ship, the people down in the engine room who are tossing coal into the engine, into the steam room, right? They don't understand that you're navigating across the globe to get there. And that's where I feel like that's kind of the biggest challenge of being a leader when you have really big audacious goals is you have to paint a vision so large that your team can find themselves within your vision, and that in itself is an attribute and a skill set that you have to develop, and using things like data and everything else that we've talked about today as part of that. But the best of them are the ones who are able to get people so inspired. I'm actually reading a book and you might want to check it out. It's called Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson. He's a guy who started a company called ClickFunnels, huge, huge, huge business now. And he talks about being a prolific leader. You have to have a vision that is not mainstream, but is just on the other side of that, close enough to crazy where people aren't going to discount you, but you can leverage your compassion and your candor to be able to say, this is where we're going. And it's those type of ideas that you can get people to buy into. Did anybody
Yeah.
ever think that there was going to be a day when there was going to be a random stranger showing up at your house and they'd pick you up and take you across town safely? Our parents told us never get in a car with a stranger, but somebody had
Right.
a vision where they changed the way that we thought about things because it was just crazy enough that they got people to buy into it and other people behind them, right? And so that's the biggest lesson of leadership. But once again, if you have enough of these experiences and you're willing to plant your flag around the corner, people are then going to come around and be like, hey, how long have you been here? That was my telehealth experience. That's my experience now when I'm trying to get people to buy into the use of AI to create access to information so they can communicate with a trusted resource, how they can ask questions and get them answered without the delay of hours that turn into days, which turns into doubt, which turns into fear. We need to use technology as an accelerator to get people the information that they need. We need to eliminate friction in doing that process because there's so much misinformation out there that I think there's an opportunity for organizations like us and you guys to be able to make a huge dent in the way that we perceive the world. And there's a mix, right? It's in there somewhere. This has been an amazing conversation today. I want to ask you one question. What have we not talked about that we should be talking about?
What have we not talked about? Gosh, I feel like we covered it all. I do think that one thing that I don't hear about often on podcasts or in conversations about entrepreneurship and leadership is, you know, how many pep talks does it take on average to keep you going? Because especially in healthcare, the work that we do is so emotionally charged and draining. And just the higher up you go, the more so, right? Because now you're not just serving families, you're serving team members and you're serving this organization. And it can feel very thankless, right? Every now and then I'll get a card from an old, kid that I helped 15 years ago, and I'm like, okay, my work is not thankless. My impact is felt, but I think that it's important to remind not only leaders, but people who are not in leadership, who are maybe judging their leaders or who feel a sense of entitlement with their leaders, just to remind them how little reinforcement and acknowledgement and encouragement we receive. And I think it's important also for me, sometimes I have to remind myself, when was the last time I felt encouraged by someone or something? And to try to build that into my social interactions or just ask for it when I need it. Your CEO needs encouragement too. And I think that we talk about like the innovation and the big stuff that I think goes over people's heads, but the work, the emotional work that it takes to do what you love because of the very fact that you love it is so taxing. And I think it's just important for us to acknowledge that work, and to thank the people who are serving the people, because it really is work that is from the heart. It takes everything in us to get up every day and to do it. I mean, any entrepreneur can get up, go get a job, and be amazing and get paid a lot of money to work at someone else's company. But the ones like me who are trying to do it for all of us, who are trying to build more diverse and inclusive workplaces where people don't have to recover just from their 8-hour day, um, we're the ones that really need the encouragement, because it just takes a lot. It takes a whole village. We don't always feel like that village is behind us. So I think that's something we don't talk about.
It's a lonely process. And I want to talk about this a little bit because often, part of my personal brand is I am very positive and optimistic, right? I've been called toxically positive by many
Hmm.
people.
I know
And
your type.
when I think about those individuals, I'm like, guys, like nobody else is cheering for me here. When in 2017, when I was in the midst of beginning of my telehealth journey, I kept going to these organizations. I'm like, guys, there's going to be a future for video, and nobody believed me. And back then, January 1st of 2017, I made a decision that the only thing that I can control is my mindset and how I see the world. So I started hopping on Instagram every single day and giving myself a pep talk like, hey guys, listen, it's going to be a great day for you. You can do it. Remember, just keep going. right?
I love
And by the
that.
time I got to 365 days, I had so many people who reached out to me and they said, hey, man, I never told you, but I watched that story on Instagram every single day. They would never comment. They would never reply. They'd never even heart for the instance of saying like. They would never even do those things. And the one thing I recognize as I was on the gym, I was at like 6:15 this morning. I'm walking on the cardio or walking on the treadmill after I got my workout done. And I was reflecting on the 10 plus years of things that I've had to overcome in this silo by myself. And now I see the fruits of my labor coming around because I have so much conviction of saying, guys, I told you I was right. And now people are starting to believe me that I started to get a little emotional while I was walking there. And I was thinking, I wish I had more people supporting me along the way, you know? And this is why I love having this podcast, because when I can sit across this digital table with leaders like yourself, I feel like we're a part of a brotherhood and a sisterhood of people who truly understand the challenges of leading from the front and always being the person who's sticking out your chest and willing to take on challenges and encourage others and lift people up. And often we don't have that support system, especially when we're in such a big fight. And it's really
Yeah.
tough to kind of lean into that sense of vulnerability of saying like, hey guys, I also need the help, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and there's really no right way for us as leaders. Team members ask for encouragement all the time. They're like, can I get some feedback? Right? I'm not getting enough recognition. But I'm like, none of us are getting enough recognition. I'm very intrinsically motivated by my work. But that doesn't mean that recognition falls on deaf ears or that it doesn't. Sometimes just someone on social media just saying, hey, I see you. Um, I appreciate this. I'm inspired by this, or I bought your book or whatever. Just for me, it reminds me of my humanity. There's this dehumanization around Black women specifically that we don't need anyone, or that we don't need encouragement, or we don't need positivity, and that we can just produce everything on our own. And I just think that it's so important for us to remember, especially in difficult positions like leadership, where we're constantly judged and we're constantly questioned. And, we are out here really leading from the front, and we don't see anyone in front of us who's doing it, And so the faith that we have to have every day, and the mistrust and the disrespect sometimes that we have to endure in order to build something that impacts other people, it just takes so much courage. And I think that we need more reminders that the work that we're doing means something, and that it doesn't have to just be just for me. It doesn't have to just because I'm intrinsically motivated by it doesn't mean that I don't need to know that what I'm doing is valuable to other people, because that's the reason why I do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think we should talk about that more, because I don't ever want to be in a position of power where people feel that if they're not like me, they don't have um, the same grit that I have, or the same knowledge. I don't want people to watch a podcast like this and go, wow, those two, I could never. We don't must anything. We just grind every day. And sometimes we cry in the shower or on the treadmill or whatever, right, Keenan? Like, that's
Yeah,
what we're
it's very
doing.
true.
That's the truth. And I think people just need to know that, sometimes my team says or does things that hurt my feelings and I cry in the shower. Going back to a place of humanity, and whether or not anybody accepts you at that version, that I think we're allowed to bring that version with us to the table too. And we should be doing it, because it models a different vibe for everyone else who feels like they can't operate at our level. Just recognizing what it takes to do it, and the fact that, listen, I didn't think I could operate at this level either. And it does take a million pep talks a month for me to keep doing it. I think that's important for people to know, because it's easy for them to see us as if we don't get in our feels.
Mm-hmm.
We're just
It's
doing
true.
it anyway. We're not. Our actions, I say all the time, I'm afraid all the time, but no emotion that I have ever directs my actions. I don't feel scared, and that's why I didn't do something. I just feel scared and I do it anyway. But I want to be acknowledged for what I'm capable and willing to do while I'm afraid, because that is hard. That's where I'm doing the hard work. And people discount, they discount it as easy. And that's why they don't have respect for the work that entrepreneurs do.
And this is why the podcast is called Hart and hustle, because there's an intersection where we find ourselves where we have to have both in order to keep making it. And that's a
Yeah.
different representation for all of us, but those two are incredibly important in that long-term success of what we're going to be able to accomplish. Oh man, this is a great conversation. The last thing I want to do is we'd like to tie our episodes together by having a previous guest ask a blind question to you. Now, they knew nothing about you, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this question. How
Okay.
do you handle underperformers?
What a question. I measure behavior for a living. That's my job. It's such a great question. I measure behavior for a living, but before I get into measurement, I lead with compassion. That's one of my personal values. I handle everyone compassionately. I assume that everyone has a path and a reason why they're underperforming. Not that that reason validates underperformance, in especially in a field where our families need you to show up at your best. But I do make sure that I address or give the person permission to address things that are occurring with them personally that may be impacting their work. And then we use measurement to guide them so that they're able to self assess the extent to which their personal things might be interfering with with their work. It's always easier for people to see themselves from a place of objectivity and compassion, and I think that that's using data and then having those like tough but compassionate conversations is the best way to give people both.
Well, I just want to say, Portia James, for everything that you're doing, for the people that you're inspiring, for the grit that it takes to continue to show up, for the challenges that you've overcome, and for your vision for the future, I feel so jacked up to continue to do the work that I do, because I know that there's
Thank,
other people who are fighting just as hard as I am out there. And for
thank you.
everybody who's tuning in and watching, Portia James, thank you so much for coming on the show. Seriously.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was amazing. One of the best talks I've ever had. I appreciate you.
And that's a wrap. There we go, guys.
Bye.